the headlines, the Korean government announces a sharp boost in its budget plan for next year to jumpstart the slow economic recovery. Hyundai Motor wins a $10 billion bid for land in Seoul's Gangnam district to build its new headquarters. Its bid was more than 3 times the appraisal price, and the market did not like the news, sending its shares down 9%. And polls open across Scotland in a referendum that will decide whether the country leaves its 307-year-old union with England and becomes an independent state. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. Live from Seoul, I am Kang Chery. The Korean government has laid out the budget plan for next year, raising the spending plan by the largest amount since the global financial crisis in 2008. Officials say their expansionary policies are essential in pulling the Korean economy out of a low-growth trap. Hwang Ji-hye starts us off.
The Korean government on Thursday unveiled its biggest spending increase in 7 years for 2015, underlining its determination to get the nation's economy back on a normal growth track. In its new budget proposal, the finance ministry said it will raise spending by 5.7% from this year to 376 trillion won, or roughly $360 billion US.
We raised spending by about $7.5 billion from our original plan. That's a massive rise considering the government's additional spending plans usually hovered around the $5 to $6 billion level in the past.
More than 30% of the 2015 budget will be spent on creating more jobs and improving welfare. It also calls for increasing expenditures in safety-related government projects like an overall inspection of safety facilities. The government aims to prevent large-scale accidents and disasters like April's ferry sinking from happening again. The proposal calls for a $32 billion budget deficit, which would represent 2.1% of the nation's GDP. But the ministry says by breathing fresh life into the sputtering economic recovery, the country would achieve fiscal balance within a few years.
The increased expenditure will result in a virtuous cycle, as it will lead to more income and robust business activities that will, in turn, generate greater tax revenues.
Korea's debt-to-GDP ratio is expected to inch up next year from this year, but the government says it still reflects Korea's relatively sound fiscal health. It says the mid-30% range is still much lower than the OECD average of around 110%. The increased spending plan is projected to help the economy grow by 4% next year. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
And another plan laid out this time by the Agriculture Ministry is fueling anger among the country's farmers. The government announced today that it has set the tariff rate for imported rice, paving the way for Korea's rice market to open up starting next year. Ji Myung-gil reports.
The Korean government has set its tariff on rice imports at 513%. The Agriculture Ministry said the high tariff will help protect Korea's rice industry as imported rice will be more expensive.
We have prepared measures such as stabilizing the income of rice farmers, modernizing the rice farming industry, and promoting the consumption of rice.
Lawmakers from the ruling Saenuri Party also said imposing high tariffs was the only answer to help locally produced rice compete with the influx of imported rice on the market. The move comes as the country is set to liberalize its rice market from next year. However, farmers and civic groups oppose the move, saying it will hurt their livelihoods and the local rice market.
The government unilaterally declared a tariff rate without even discussing it with the farmers or the public. The whole process was done in secret.
The ministry said the proposed tariff rate will be submitted to the World Trade Organization before the end of this month. If the rate is confirmed by the WTO, the proposed tariff will go into effect on January 1st of 2015. However, it could be months until the process is finalized, while the WTO assesses whether the tariff rate proposed by Korea is appropriate. Korea had been allowed to delay the opening of its rice market under a WTO quota agreement in 1993 in exchange for gradually increasing its mandatory import quota, which reached more than 400,000 tons this year. The agreement with the WTO requires Korea to continue importing the mandatory quota even after the market is opened next year at a 5% tariff rate. The government could not afford to further postpone the opening of the rice market, nor had a reason to do so, as the country's rice consumption continues to drop. 김영길, ARIRANG News.
The main opposition party, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, has picked five-term lawmaker Moon Hee-sang to head the party's emergency committee starting Friday. As the newly elected head, Moon will bear the responsibility of putting an end to in-house squabbling and prepare for the party's convention to select a new leader early next year. Interim Chief Park Young-sun had been heading the committee since co-chairs An Chol-soo and Kim Han-gil stepped down over the party's by-election defeat in July. Key officials from South Korea, China, Japan, and the United States are discussing security issues at the Northeast Asia Cooperation Dialogue for 2 days through Friday. Maritime tensions between Japan and China reportedly garnered a lot of attention on day one, according to some participants of the closed-door forum. Diplomatic officials and scholars from the four countries are expected to discuss North Korea's denuclearization and conditions for resuming the six-party nuclear talks on the second day.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chery for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. Hyundai Motor Group has won a bid to acquire land in the affluent district of Gangnam in Seoul. Hyundai's final offer came in at $10 billion, 3 times the appraisal price of the site, and outbid Samsung Electronics. The estate is nearly 80,000 square meters in size and is one of the last remaining large plots of land available for development in the capital. It currently houses the headquarters of the state-run power company KEPCO. Hyundai Motor says it plans to build a global business center on the site, but the market did not like this news. On today's announcement, shares of Hyundai Motor and its sister brand Kia Motors fell 9% and 10% each, while KEPCO's went up 6%. The Park Geun-hye administration has been pushing for easing regulations that will help prop up the Korean economy, but Korean enterprises do not appear to be too happy with the government's recent deregulation measures. In a survey conducted by the Korea Development Institute on 300 local businesses, the overall reform efforts were given a grade of 2.7 out of 5. The ratings were even lower when assessing the way the government is communicating with enterprises. About 30% of respondents said there were still too many regulations in the country. A long string of reports in recent months have pointed to a considerable drop in private consumption here in Korea. Efforts to turn the tide have so far proven unsuccessful, and a new report outlines the reasons why. Connie Kim reports.
Increasing household debt and the lackluster youth employment rate are to blame for Korea's sluggish private consumption. That's the diagnosis by the Federation of Korean Industries in a recent report. The shrinking spending capacity of households was pinpointed as the biggest problem limiting consumption. The level of household debt last year stood at nearly $980 billion, which represents more than 70% of the nation's GDP. Now that's up about 20 percentage points from a decade ago. The increase in non-living expenditures such as taxes and insurance is also holding households back from spending. Non-living expenditures grew more than 70% last year from 10 years earlier, with household income increasing far less at less than 60%. Low youth employment was another troubling factor. While more than 400,000 new jobs were created last year, new positions for those in their 20s dropped by 80,000, while those for people in their 50s rose more than 200,000. Rising home rental prices, medical expenses, and difficulties in preparing for life after retirement were also cited in the report as reasons for Korea's sluggish private consumption. Officials at the Federation of Korean Industries say it's important to increase investment, which would generate employment and in turn lead to a boost in consumption. The Federation also called for measures that could induce corporate investment. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
The world's two biggest tech giants, Samsung and Apple, are busy releasing their latest gadgets. The phablets and handsets will come with upgrades, and apparently it's not just tech enthusiasts who are jumping for joy. Kim Hyun-bin has more.
Pre-orders for the Galaxy Note 4 began on Thursday in Korea. The newest phablet from Samsung comes with the 64-bit application processor, the first to run on the Android-based operating system, which means it will process data 2 times faster than current models that are equipped with 32-bit processors. And much like a car engine that has a higher engine displacement. This means the 64-bit Galaxy Note 4 requires more space for random access memory, making higher quality memory chips a necessity. That's got Korea's semiconductor industry excited. Industry trackers predict a 25% boost or more in memory chips as more companies release 64-bit smartphones, particularly those that require 4 to 8 GB RAMs. The gaming industry also stands to benefit. Since the 64-bit smartphone will have higher definition, gamers will enjoy a better experience when using their smartphones, which will narrow the gap between PC and smartphone gaming. Apple's iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, which are expected to be released in Korea between October and November, are also equipped with the 64-bit application processor. Google is expected to unveil a 64-bit smartphone sometime this fall. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Korea has become one of the most visited countries by Chinese tourists, and with China's National Day holiday just around the corner, a record number of visitors are expected to fly across the West Sea. Kim Min-ji tells us more.
China's week-long National Day holiday kicks off on October 1st this year. Around 160,000 Chinese tourists are expected to flock to Seoul, up 35% from the same period a year ago. Nearly 8 million foreign tourists visited the country this year as of July, and about 3.4 million, or 4 in every 10 foreign visitors, were Chinese. And it's a trend that's likely to continue. The total number of Chinese visitors is expected to reach 5 million next month and 6 million by the end of the year. Will they open their wallets? Chinese people are much wealthier than they used to be, with their gross national income per capita standing at around $6,700 last year. And they aren't shy about spending while they're here either.
Chinese tourists tend to spend more during special occasions. In the case of the national holiday, they're expected to shell out nearly $3,000 each.
It's estimated that Chinese tourists will spend over $400 million during the holiday week alone. But the increased spending doesn't necessarily go into the pockets of Korea.
Many visitors arrange their visits through Chinese travel agencies or dwell in Chinese-operated hotels, so a significant portion of the profits actually go back to China.
He added that to prevent such a phenomenon, Korea needs to develop its tourism infrastructure, for instance by providing more language assistance and making it more convenient for Chinese tourists while they are here. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Tomorrow, the 17th Asian Games, hosted by Korea's western port city of Incheon, will hold its grand opening ceremony. Korea's history with this sporting event dates back 60 years, and Team Korea has proven itself as a fierce competitor over that time. Our Kwon-soo has more.
Asia's biggest sporting event, the Asian Games, finally gets started on Friday in Korea's northwestern port city of Incheon. The history of the Asian Games dates back to 1951, when it was first hosted in New Delhi. 35 years later, the event came to South Korea for the first time when it was hosted by Seoul, followed by Busan in 2002. Incheon now becomes the third Korean city to have the honors. South Korea first participated in the Asian Games in 1954 in Manila, when it placed third in the overall medal count and has sent athletes to every event since. In 1970 in Bangkok, Korean swimmer Cho Ho-ryun began his rise to legendary status, winning gold in the 400 and 1500-meter freestyles. At the 8th Games in Bangkok, Korea's Kim Jin-ho won gold in archery, while Yang Jung-mo came out on top in wrestling. In 1981, Korea started preparing to host the 10th Asian Games in Seoul. Stadiums, accommodations, and new roads were built leading up to the event in 1986.
30억 아시아인이 공동의 번영과 우위를 약속하면서 아시아의 영원한 전진을 다짐한 아시아인의 축제가 열린 것입니다.
Team Korea thrived that year, breaking various world records and finishing second overall. Korea showed its superiority in male and female hockey, defeated China in table tennis, and swept up medals in all 12 weight classes of boxing.
동화가 꺼졌습니다. 우리는 해냈습니다.
Korea has grown into a powerful sports nation throughout the years and aims to prove it once again at the 2014 Incheon Asian Games, where the goal is to win at least 90 gold medals. 권소아, 아리랑 뉴스.
Voting in Scotland is underway in a landmark poll that will determine the fate of the country's future with the United Kingdom. And for more, Paul E. is joining us, of course, from the News Center. Paul, the big question on everyone's mind is, should Scotland become an independent country?
Well, the decision marks an unprecedented moment in British politics, and both the yes and no camps are cutting it right down to the wire. Latest polls leading up to the referendum are too close to call, with undecided voters likely to swing the final result in either direction. Our Shin Se-min reports.
For what could be one of the most important decisions of their lives, it comes down to the simplest of choices: yes or no. Polls have opened across Scotland for some 4 million eligible voters who will decide on whether their country serves its 307-year union with the United Kingdom.
Yes, I'm happy with the decisions on that very well. And I'll go all the way. And if we get it tomorrow, I'll be a very happy man.
Definitely no, no, no. Because we're better as a team. A team always works better than an individual.
The latest poll released Wednesday showed a paper-thin lead for the no campaign at 51 to 49%, but it's far too close to call. The survey also showed as many as 600,000 Scots are still undecided about which way they'll vote.
I am still undecided. It's worrying, but it's such a huge decision to make, and we all need to take our vote very, very seriously, so I still really don't know what I'm going to do.
If Scotland decides to secede from Great Britain, there are a lot of unknowns. Will the newly independent country still have a future with the European Union? And there'll also be a critical decision to take on its currency. They'll also only have 18 months to arrange all the logistics. But if Scotland chooses to stay within the UK, the relations with the country will most likely be different, as British Prime Minister David Cameron has said London will grant Scotland more powers to govern itself. Shin Se-min, 아리랑 뉴스.
The U.S. House of Representatives has passed President Barack Obama's plans to help rebels in Syria fight off IS militants. It looks like the White House was able to get the Republicans on board this time.
Well, begrudgingly, yes, but many of his opponents say it's too little, too late. Obama asked for $500 million to better equip and train Syrians in the U.S.-led campaign against the jihadist group. This as U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says the need for a greater response from the international coalition is growing. Park Ji-won has his story.
Despite reservations, the U.S. House of Representatives signed off on President Barack Obama's plans to arm and train Syrian rebel forces for their fight against Islamic State militants. The Senate votes next and is widely expected to approve the bill.
I want to start off by saying thank you to House members, Republican and Democrat, who came together today to pass an important component on our strategy for dealing with this terrible terrorist organization.
It's the latest step in the U.S. plan to degrade and destroy the IS militant group. Appearing in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, U.S. Secretary of State Kang Chery said the international community was coming together to counter the threat. He said more than 50 countries have already pledged their support, and that more were expected to follow at the UN General Assembly next week.
I'm confident that with our strategy in place and our international partners by our side, we will have all that we need, and with the help of the Congress, we will be able to succeed in degrading and ultimately destroying this monstrous organization wherever it exists.
The strategy will apparently not include U.S. ground troops, something that President Obama repeated during a visit to the U.S. Central Command on Wednesday.
But I want to be clear. The American forces that have been deployed to Iraq do not and will not have a combat mission. They will support Iraqi forces on the ground as they fight for their own country against these terrorists.
Obama emphasized that the U.S. would maintain a supporting role, saying it's the best way to secure peace in the region amid the brutality of the extremist group. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Thank you, sir.
And turning back to Asia, Paul, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has welcomed President Xi Jinping on a rare state visit by a top Chinese leader. Give us the rundown of the summit.
Well, President Xi's visit is said to be aimed at strengthening trade and strategic ties between the world's two most populous countries. Both leaders are set to discuss a range of economic deals worth tens of billions of dollars, which would easily surpass the some $400 million China has already poured into India over the past 14 years. New Delhi is hoping Beijing can provide much-needed boost in its infrastructure and manufacturing projects, while China seeks a closer ally amid tense regional affairs.
China and India are the world's two largest developing countries and emerging markets. We are also two important forces in an increasingly multipolar world. Therefore, our relationship has strategic and global significance. When our two countries work with each other for common development, we can bring benefit to 2.5 billion people.
Following the welcoming ceremony, President Xi paid tribute at a memorial site of the country's iconic leader, Mahatma Gandhi. The Chinese president's three-day visit to India represents the last leg of his Southeast Asian tour that includes stops in Sri Lanka and the Maldives.
And finally, Japan is trying to resume its whale hunting program despite widespread criticism from the international community as well as animal rights groups. A UN court has banned Japan from whaling. How are they trying to circumvent this?
Well, despite that ruling from the International Court of Justice, Tokyo is pushing to change a resolution about global whaling criteria to allow Japanese groups to engage in what it calls scientific whaling. The UN court said in March that the country's program was not scientific, nor had it produced substantial research results. The issue has dominated the agenda at the International Whaling Commission's meeting in Slovenia this week, where pro- and anti-whaling groups continue to clash.
We remain hopeful that the Whaling Commission will this week tighten the noose on Japan's scientific whaling. Unfortunately, some of the redrafting of the New Zealand resolution that's going on behind closed doors could pave the way for more scientific whaling by Japan. We're very concerned the IWC should not harpoon the judgment of the World Court.
In reaction, Australia announced it would join New Zealand as part of efforts to stop Japan's harpooning of hundreds of whales, saying it's of the view that lethal scientific research is not necessary. Charity?
All right, Paul, thank you very much for those stories, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather updates. Most regions began the day with a nice breeze before the mercury rose to the high 20s in the afternoon, except for Jeju, where a light sporadic showers continue to fall. With clear skies on Friday, the weather looks to be absolutely perfect for spending time outdoors, but be aware as a big gap in temperatures from day to night will continue. Some good news that warm autumn conditions are forecast to last over the weekend, so if you haven't already, it would be a good idea to make plans to soak up some of that vitamin D. Let's take a closer look at tomorrow's ratings. Seoul starts off the day at 15 degrees before rising to 29 in the afternoon. Daegu and Gwangju hit 28. On to other places. Daejeon makes it to 27, Jeju 24, Dokdo and Mount Kumgang 23 and 27. That's all for now. I'll be back with more updates after 10. See you then.
All right, thank you very much, Bo-kyung, and that will do it for now. Thanks for watching, and I will see you again back here at 10 p.m. Korea time.